I'm not going to belabor the point at all. Kingdom Come Deliverance II is one of the best sequels to any game I've ever played. It's one of the most immersive RPGs I've ever played. It's got one of the most compelling narratives for any RPG I've ever played. And to put it simply, it is one of my favorite games I have ever played in my life. And I'm still a little bit in shock and awe over how good it is. And that's the review. That's the review. It is unquestionably a triumph and everything that Kingdom Come Deliverance fans were dreaming of getting in the sequel. Everything from the writing to the graphics to the acting performances to the gameplay systems and the various enhancements they've received all contribute to the game's delivery as one of the most impressive RPGs in recent memory. In this video, I'm going to break down why I think it's so tremendous, and I'm also going to point out the very few things that I would change or tweak if it were up to me. But take this as my unequivocal recommendation and stamp seal of approval. I love this game. I imagine if you liked Kingdom Come Deliverance, you will like it too. It's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned, and undoubtedly a Game of the Year contender already this early in 2025. To be clear, it still is one of those games that's not going to be for everybody. We're going to talk more about that later, but in its pursuit to be the very best medieval immersive sim RPG that it possibly can be, it also is unapologetic in that pursuit to the point where it will turn some people off, but the people that it doesn't turn off will absolutely love it. And I think it's actually one of its strengths that it's not trying to appeal to everybody. But if you're just looking for the thumbs up, thumbs down, this is 15 thumbs up. I can't recommend it enough. It is fantastic and I love it. And all I want to do is play it through again. After 85 hours with a first run, I just want to put in another 1,000 to see how many other things I can do. It's fantastic. So highly recommend it. But if you want to hear more details, that's what the rest of this video is for. Don't have a sponsor or anything, but if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoy my coverage of games, subscribe and like the video if you are interested in more, or don't. I'm not your dad. I can't tell if you do or don't. I'm just glad you're watching. Let's get into it. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 starts literally right where the last game left off. From the outset, it's clear that everything has received a significant polish and enhancement over the first game. Much of the original Kingdom Come Deliverance felt like it was hanging together with duct tape and wood glue, but this time around, it feels as though this is a cutting-edge AAA game. I tested it not just on my massive gaming PC, but also on my gaming laptop with a 3070 in it, and I also even played probably 30 to 50% of my total gameplay time on my ROG Ally handheld while I was traveling through January, since they gave us a full month to review this thing. That's how confident they were in how good this was going to be. They gave it to us back on like January 4th. That's insane. I can't think of the last time I got a review code a month early, but there's good reason, because they knew what they had here and they knew how good it was. But the point is, in addition to the performance enhancements where it's very scalable, able to run on a handheld gaming device and then also on a high-end PC, they've also taken steps to polish out all of the bugs and glitches that were so, let's just say, integral to the experience of the first game. I can't really think of more than maybe 1 or 2 bugs that I came across in that 85 hours that it took me to play through my first run of the game. And even those were like, oh no, when I hopped off my horse, I kind of got stuck for a minute and then I figured it out and hopped over the fence and then I was fine. Like, they're really minimal. And it's my understanding that the build that's launching on February 4th is going to be even more polished than the one I've been playing for a month. So I can only imagine how good it will be. It really is a massive leap forward, and it's very impressive, especially when you played the first game and you know where that game was technically. It's pretty crazy how much they've improved this one. But beyond just the polish, the game has also received a significant facelift in terms of the graphics and fidelity. Density of foliage in the forests is crazy, cutscenes are beautiful, and they've also leaned heavily into cinematic quality with larger set pieces and careful blocking of sequences that are key to the main story. In the gameplay department, there have been other things streamlined, such as combat, with individual weapons receiving their own particular styles of combat. It's still using the key mechanics of the first game where it's all about stances and where you're positioned and how you're holding the weapon. But for example, an axe will play and fight differently than if you're using a great sword or a single hand sword with a shield. All of that will play very differently, as it should. Whereas in the first game, everything kind of felt like a weirdly shaped sword no matter what you were using. It still takes a little bit of time to get comfortable with the combat, but once you've gone around, taken lessons from the various combat experts available through the open world, you'll learn new abilities that make combat a breeze. And by the end of the game, you will truly feel like a knight battling your way through waves and waves of enemies, which brings me to another enhancement they've made. From literally the opening moment of the game, you will see how much they've improved the scalability of the engine and encounter design. They can have a lot more enemies on screen at any one time, and all of those enemies can be interacted with, have their own AI, are fighting you. You can go up to them and engage them in combat, and the streamlining of the combat system also makes it easier to juggle multiple enemies, which was a big problem with the first game, where it was very clunky whenever there was more than one enemy facing you down. Stealth detection and the AI behaviors of NPCs have also seen overhauls, but mostly under the hood. It will most likely just lead to situations where you'll see NPCs reacting to your behaviors much more organically and realistically. This is also a staple of the first game, where if you were dirty or covered in blood, shopkeepers might notice that. But this time around, I felt like everybody was much more aware of what I looked like, how I was acting and behaving. If I was walking around a town and I didn't carry a torch with me at night, but then I went up to somebody to try and speak to an NPC in the cover of night, then they would comment on how suspicious it looked that I was walking around without a torch, even if I was talking to like an innkeeper or something. All of those little bitty details have been significantly polished, and it's noticeable, especially once you start playing a lot of the game and you really get into it. But even with all of these enhancements, it's important to understand that this game is an evolution and refinement of the original. It's not a reinvention or a revolution. It is an evolution. If you didn't like the first game, there is a very low chance that this game will magically start appealing to you. It's important to note that, I feel, because many of the frictions and grievances people had with the original have been ironed out here, such as the combat being polished so Henry does what you want him to do when you want him to do it, or things like the enemy AI being refined so their behaviors are more realistic and thus predictable, or even how the in-game economy works, with shopkeepers having inventory simulated in a way that actually helps the player once they understand the day-to-day operations and motions of the town's shoppers. And all of these things enhance the player experience, but at the end of the day, it's still a Kingdom Come Deliverance game. It prioritizes immersion and realism above simplified gameplay mechanics that are meant to appeal to the widest possible audience. And put simply, KCD2 knows what it's trying to be, and it is unapologetic in that pursuit of being the best Kingdom Come type game that it possibly can be. And that means it's going to turn off a lot of people that like the more approachable RPG stylings of, like, I don't know, an Assassin's Creed Valhalla or something. But if you're somebody that tried AC Valhalla and found it too shallow and lacking depth and things like that, this is the game for you. This is the polar opposite of that. And I personally am okay with that. This phenomenon is made all the clearer as you work through the first 10 or so hours of the game, and the first open world zone opens up to the player once you finish the prologue. You'll start to complete side quests and explore the map, no doubt occasionally running into enemies that are significantly better equipped than you, that know different fighting techniques than you, and simply have more experience in this world than you. And that's the moment when the player can start to think outside the box and figure out how to make their way in this world by themselves. The player can choose in Kingdom Come Deliverance II to become a potion master, for example, brewing all sorts of concoctions to sell to vendors around the map to make money, to then take to armorers and blacksmiths to get yourself kitted up. On the flip side, if you want to play just as a peaceful hunter, going around and collecting meat from deer and other game to sell to local butchers, you can do that. Or if you want to play as a thief, going around pickpocketing vendors so you can get the items you want right away, occasionally risking a trip to the stockades, you can do that. But the point is, it's up to the player to find their place in this world, and it's going to be slightly different for every player. And this is one of the things that really solidifies KCD2's position as a phenomenal RPG for me. I played the game in a very aggressive and, let's just say, criminally motivated way during the preview back in early December. They flew me out to New York City to play the game for an entire day from the start, just play the game, no restrictions or anything, just go have fun. And when I did that, I just tried to play like a scumbag. I went and robbed people. I went and attacked anybody I saw walking on the street. I just went crazy. And my experience was very different from my experience in the review version of the game that I played when I decided to play much more, immersed, trying to role play it as Henry, trying to do good, but occasionally needing to do bad in the pursuit of a good end and things like that. And even though I played through pretty much the entirety of the game in that latter way, I know that if I went through again, I would have a very different experience with people reacting to me very differently. If I was a well-known criminal and I was trying to help these local lords and things, but they don't want to be associated with me because of my track record and because I'm branded as a criminal, literally branded on my skin. And I love that. And it adds replay value. It makes me want to go back through the game again, even after 85 hours with it, because I know it's going to be significantly different. And that's the real power of RPGs in theory when they are well designed, is it has almost endless replay value, because based on how you, imagine this, role play, your experience will be totally different. You hear that? BioWare. Can you imagine playing an RPG and being able to like make choices and not just be a group therapy simulator? Can you imagine? Regardless, my playstyle typically led me to pursuing bandit camps and enemy outposts that I could go and fight my way through, at which point I would collect the enemy's armor that was most valuable, and after washing it and keeping it stored away for an extended period of time such that it wouldn't appear stolen to vendors, I would then take it to local vendors and sell it off while keeping the best gear for myself. And as I played through the game and realized that this was my preferred playstyle, basically going through and cleaning up bandit camps that were causing trouble for local villages and then keeping their stuff for myself, I selected perks, which have been totally revamped as well, that specifically fed into this playstyle. Things that would allow, for example, the stolen status on items to clear faster, so I wouldn't have to keep it stowed away for as long before I could flip it. I could move faster and deliver goods and sell it much more frequently. Or there were even other perks, like one that allowed me to be able to tell if an item would look stolen in this particular city I'm currently in, knowing that I could take these goods and sell them in this city, but I might have to go to a different city to sell these other goods. But again, I'm sure that there's a lot of players who will never use those perks because that's not key to their play style. They're like, no, I make all my money selling meat that I go and collect in the forests, and I don't bother with clearing out camps because I'm not a big fan of the combat in this game. It's up to you. You can do whatever you want, and it's freaking cool. After I sold off all the gear to various merchants, I would then go and spend the money on food and potions and things that I didn't want to prepare myself. Not necessarily because I dislike preparing food or going hunting in these games, but because the way I was role-playing it led to me using all of my skills and abilities and perks, pursuing a very particular playstyle, so I was not super efficient at hunting or at crafting potions and things. So it just wasn't that practical for me to do it myself when I had this other thing I was specialized in. But in subsequent playthroughs, I have no doubt I'm going to try playing as more of a hunter herbalist character that doesn't bother with buying any of that because he's just better at doing it himself. After I used the money to buy food and potions, I would then occasionally use my blacksmith skills to prepare and upgrade weapons when I needed to, and my chosen playstyle even affected which kind of horse I wanted. I actually traveled around the map for a solid 45 minutes visiting various horse traders to find the one with the horse that had the most carrying capacity so that I could load it up with all the heavy pieces of armor that I would collect so I wouldn't have to travel back to my stash as frequently to dump it. And this is how you know that a game's systems are working. When you find yourself engaging with all these various systems in sort of an interlocking web where you are engaging with the horse system, the ability to buy different horses and choose those carefully, because this will affect your other way of playing over here. And then that carrying capacity is something you have to think about. So you go and you upgrade these skills and then, oh, well, I also want to be able to quickly collect this stuff. So I'm going to go and I'm going to upgrade this perk that gives me the ability to run faster with heavy armor or whatever it may be. And all of these different things start working together in the pursuit of your one selected play style. And at the same time, if you wanted to play a different way, it would change how you engage with all of these systems, though they still would all work together. Maybe I wouldn't choose the tough, super heavy duty horse that was super stupid expensive. Maybe instead I would choose a horse that was faster. Or maybe if I was playing as somebody that was all about thieving, I would only ever dress as an aristocratic lord type person, very wealthy and erudite, so I would never really have any heavy duty armor on my person because it would cause NPCs to look at me more suspiciously. All of these different systems will be engaged with differently based on your playstyle, and it's robust enough to support whatever that playstyle is. And moreover, each of these playstyles is reflected in the dialogue, in cutscenes and NPC interactions, even within side quests and when interacting with merchants. And the way that the leveling system works is built very similar to Skyrim from back in the day, where if you use one skill, that will gain experience specific to that skill so that it levels up. So if all you're doing is engaging with like two-handed sword combat, you will level that up, but you won't magically get better at using a crossbow because that wouldn't really make sense. And it's once again another example of this game not trying to be everything for everybody. It's not trying to create the generic like escapist fantasy game where you're just magically good at everything you do. Instead, you will become good at the stuff that you specialize and work at, which I find much more engaging and immersive. But Kingdom Come Deliverance II is not just about the things that you actively do. Perhaps more importantly, it's also a game about the things that are more mundane and ordinary that make the world feel alive and genuine. The fact that if you go walking through the mud in a rainstorm and then you walk up to a shopkeeper, that merchant will comment on your state of dress and may even change the prices they're willing to offer you based on how disheveled you look, is really, really freaking cool to me. I remember at one point early in the game, not my proudest moment, I went and stealth killed somebody because I really desperately needed food. I was like starving to death. And so I killed someone and I took a pretzel out of their inventory. And then I walked back out onto the road and I lit my torch and I started walking like nothing was wrong. And then a guard walked up to me and engaged me in dialogue. And I tried to play it like I didn't do anything. I don't know what that scream was that you heard. And then the camera swapped back to Henry. And I realized that because I had stabbed the guy in the throat in his sleep, blood had sprayed all over my face. And so I was covered in blood, eating a pretzel with a torch in my hand, being like, I didn't kill anybody. As you would expect, the guard called my bluff and was like, yeah, no, you're the guy, and attacked me. And you know, that was that. It didn't turn out so good. But it's one of those things that you have to think about that other games you just wouldn't ever ponder. Like in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you would just go fighting and killing people, and then you go start dialogue and nobody says anything or considers it. In KCD2, you have to go after you do something like that and go to the trough and wash off your face and hands, maybe go to the baths to get fully cleaned up and get all your clothes cleaned, and then you go to speak with the guard or shopkeeper or whatever. It's just one of those things that some people will love, other people I'm sure will hate because it's a little more tedious perhaps, but I find it extremely immersive and it makes me take the world more seriously, frankly. Other things have to be considered as well, as you would expect if you played the first game, such as the food you're going to eat each day to avoid the physical affliction known as hunger. But one also must be careful to know what they've eaten so that they don't overindulge and make themselves sick. The player also needs to be cognizant of how long it's been since Henry has slept. Not just because staying up for 2 days straight will lead to exhaustion, which affects basically every attribute and stat, but also because the game's primary means of saving your progress is when you sleep in a bed that you've either paid for or own. Or if you're out and about or participating in a high stakes quest, you can of course drink some savior schnapps that you either buy or brew or steal. And there are many more systems like this at play within the game, where it is unforgiving and at times tedious. Even something as typically insignificant in a video game as being caught in the act of stealing can have long-lasting effects, with Henry being taken to the stockades and suffering public humiliation as a result. And if you commit too many crimes or too serious a crime, you could even find yourself branded, which will allow everyone you interact with to see that you are a criminal who shouldn't be trusted, potentially leading to innkeepers refusing to let you stay at their property, or merchants refusing to do business with you since they consider it too risky. One of the other things that happened very early on in my time with the game is that I went and I made a series of mistakes and tried to steal a horse, and I got caught. and I went to the stockades, and Henry, the player character, was so utterly humiliated by this that he could not pass charisma based checks. Like he could not pass persuasion type checks. Like he just couldn't do anything because he was so utterly humiliated by having rotten fruit and veg thrown at his face. And it's just one of those things that, again, in another game, oh, I got caught stealing. Oh, well, maybe I pay 10 gold pieces and everything's fine, or I just run away. They stop searching for me. You know, the GTA stars go away and we're just back to normal. But not in this game. In this game, you get caught, it can affect the player character for like 3, 4, 5 in-game days. It's crazy. But after saying all of this, this is where we reach perhaps the most important disclosure in the entirety of this video, which I touched on earlier, which is simply to say that KCD2 is not going to be for everybody. As I've been describing how the game works, you probably are either sitting up in your chair getting excited, you know, excited at all of the countless possibilities for immersive roleplay. But others, no doubt, will be looking at this and will feel like it is far too much to juggle and just sounds like more of a hassle than a fun video game. And I think both groups are justified in those opinions. KCD2, just like the first game, is not made for everybody, but the people it is made for will absolutely love it. Whether it's the immersive components, the revamped and polished combat and various gameplay systems, or the breathtaking recreations of medieval cities and villages, with Kuttenberg's recreation being a particular standout in this game and cementing itself as probably one of the most impressive recreations of a historical setting in any video game ever. Whatever it may be that appeals to you, if you have heard any of this and it's intrigued you, I encourage you to play it, because KCD2 has the potential to be one of the most, I would say, incredible gaming experiences you've ever had. It's just utterly phenomenal. It's crazy. I struggle to come up with the words to explain how much I love it. It's crazy. I don't know if other reviewers will love it as much as I do, but my goodness, I adore this game. But with that said, we're now at the rapid fire part of the video, where as I've been writing and scripting this entire thing, I realized that this video is getting too long for a review. And so I've decided to just create a bullet point list of stuff I want to talk about and run through. So buckle up, here we go. To start, let's talk about some of the specific things that I love in KCD2. The exploration is phenomenally well realized, with varied dynamic events, with side quests you can just stumble onto, with immersion being the centerpiece of everything. There's also a lot of stories that you get to explore, and also stories that you sometimes don't get to explore. I remember exploring a sort of muddy marsh, and I came across a dead body in this sort of cave-like structure. There was a camp, and it looked like it had been abandoned, or I guess untended to, for a while after the body kind of slumped into the water and was being ravaged by local wildlife. And I saw it and I was like, I think this might be part of like a side quest or something, maybe, because the body is very like peculiarly laid out here, and it's such a weird set piece to build in the middle of this swamp in the middle of nowhere in the map. But I never figured out what it was. I never figured out if that had anything to do with anything. I never heard an NPC mention it. I never got a side quest bringing me to that location, but I might have honestly just missed it because the game is that big and there's so much going on. Or maybe it's just one of those things that they put in the game for you to find, and it doesn't really have a story beyond what you can see. And that mystery is part of why you explore, because sometimes it ties into a side quest or a main story quest, or you can take that information to somebody that finds it useful. But other times it's just a tragedy that exists in this world, and you're left to your imagination to figure it out and piece it together. In this same vein, side quests can be completely ignored, or they can be started and later abandoned, but NPCs involved in those side quests will notice and remember if you don't complete the objectives, and certainly not in a timely manner. For example, I tested a side quest, no spoilers, that involved a person that needed help like immediately. They were in a very dangerous, serious situation. And I decided to drink some Savior schnapps, and I went off and did something else for like 2-3 in-game days. And then I tried to come back to pick up that quest that was very urgent where I left it off. And the person that needed help, I found dead, and the quest just failed and ended. And the people that asked me to help that person were of course livid. And it was this whole thing. And then I loaded back to the Save Your Schnapp save, and I went through the quest as it kind of asked you to do, where it's like, this person really needs help, and I ran off to help that person, and it led to another like 30, 45 minutes of gameplay and other steps in this quest to figure out who hurt this person and how to get them back or what to do with them. And it's that confidence in the player, and it's that confidence in what they've built to not just force you to do everything that they've designed that I just absolutely love. The ability to ruin the game almost for yourself is something that I find to be crucial in RPGs. You know, maybe the classic example is in something like Fallout New Vegas. You can kill any one of the quest givers, even main quest characters. You can just walk up and shoot them, and the entire main story could fail because of that. But then you just get to run around doing side quests. But they let you ruin the game for yourself because they know that that agency is something the player will learn to respect, and they respect the player enough to give them that agency. And it's the same thing here in KCD 2. Whereas other modern RPGs, I feel, constantly hold the player's hand and are like, no, you're gonna do this side quest and you're gonna like it. And yeah, even though this is like really important and it's really pressing in terms of time, yeah, if you need a week, yeah, come back and do it later. And I find that really frustrating. And I love that KCD 2, when characters tell you to do something now, they mean it. And if you don't do it now, there will be punishments and repercussions. In my preview video, I mentioned a quest very, very early on in the game that I will keep vague for sake of spoilers for you. But basically, a person told me to meet them outside of the fort early in the morning, first thing at daybreak, and they were going to ride off on horseback to take care of some bandits that had raided a wagon. Problem is, at that point in the game, I didn't have a horse. So I went off and innocently started searching for money and trying to find a way to buy a horse, because this was also one of those times where I had been put in the stockades, so I couldn't pass charisma checks or persuasion checks to convince somebody to lend me a horse or to give me a sort of derpy horse or something. So I had to go find money, and I left for a solid day or two. And I came back to the quest giver to kickstart this whole side quest thing, going and meeting them out and finding where the bandits had gone. But they had already gone. They had left. I didn't get to see what happened there. I missed out on that entire 45-minute quest line, basically. I didn't get any of the loot. I didn't get any of the experience. I didn't get any of that. And I got chastised by the quest giver, and my reputation dropped in that city as a result of it. And it was one of the coolest things I've seen in a preview for a game, where just my choice to go do something else for a little while had significant consequences on the back end. And of course, when I played the game for review, I played it properly, and I went and completed the quest when he asked me to, and I got a pretty significant reward, let's just say, for doing that. And it's just so cool to me how much of the game can be engaged with or completely ignored based on the player's choices, but the devs know that the player is going to carefully consider what choices to make, and so they're okay with it. If you want to miss out on this quest because you're role playing in this way, okay, cool, that's up to you. And I think it's bloody brilliant. This game is also really easy to get lost in. I couldn't even tell you how many times I was exploring the open world, would stumble on something that was seemingly insignificant that would kickstart an entire side quest that would sidetrack me for an hour and a half. It's one of my favorite things in RPGs that are really well built, and it is a staple of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It happened so many times I lost count, and there are many, many examples that I could point to as proof of this, but for sake of immersion and because these are more dynamic occurrences, and of course, because I don't want to spoil things for you, I will not be too specific. But let's just say there are many times when you'll just be out riding your horse and you'll see something, and it may seem like just a total nothing burger. Oh yeah, sure, I'll stop off and see what this person's doing. But it can turn into a massive side adventure if you choose to let it become that. Or you just kill the quest giver immediately and you move on. They're pretty flexible. Other things that are really impressive to me are the writing and the pacing. The game is massive, no doubt, and I'm sure for some people the extensive dialogue sequences may get a little frustrating, but for me, I was enthralled the entire time. The characters' behaviors seem perfectly well justified and realistic, and the pace at which the story unfolds is actually pretty well done. It's really hard to gauge pacing in a game like this because so much of it depends on the player's choices. There are many times in the main story where you can go off and do some side stuff, and it's understood like, okay, we're gonna get to this when you have a minute, but go do what you need to do. And as a result, like the player could take 10 hours between main story quests if they wanted to, just doing a bunch of side stuff, maybe even more. And so pacing is really tough to describe in a game like this because the player will basically make it or break it. But even with that, I engaged with almost all of the side content, except for a few that I missed out on because of main story events that happened and cut off my access to those quests, as you would expect. And I mean, I had a great time. I never got bored, and I never felt like the game overstayed its welcome. I, if anything, was upset that it was over after 85 hours, that's pretty impressive, you know, for a game to last that long and still be engaging. That's not that common. I will say, just because I'm sure some people will ask what total size of this game is like, my understanding is that if you do every single side quest, if you engage with everything in the game, you know, a standard completionist run, you can probably expect to get somewhere between 90 and 110 hours, somewhere in that zone. I know that's a fairly wide range, but that's at least my understanding of how big the game is if you just play every single quest line. Practically speaking, I think if you're just sprinting through the main story and doing basically nothing else, I honestly have no idea how long that would take you. I don't know if it's 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours. I really don't know, just because so much of what makes KCD good is in the side quests and how they interweave with main story characters and quest lines and things, that the idea of sprinting through just the main story is kind of horrifying to me. But you know, I'm sure you can. I just honestly don't know how long that would take you if you were just doing that. So unfortunately, I don't have a clear number for that, since I was constantly doing side stuff intertwined with main story stuff. And you know, I don't know. I don't know how long it would take you to just sprint through the main story, but I would heavily recommend that you don't do that when you play this. Engage with the side stuff, do every side quest you can find, because they're all bangers. Paired with the great writing, the voice cast is fantastic. The motion capture and acting is extremely well done. And honestly, there wasn't a single time where I went, oh, or wanted somebody to be recast or a scene to be reshot. It's all extremely well done, and I'm thoroughly impressed by the performances here. I would not be surprised if one or two of these fellas gets a nomination for Best Actor at the Game Awards, because my goodness, they kill it. As an RPG, there's also, as I've alluded to, many different branching options for the player to engage with. After the main story ended and I saw how my choices played out and affected everything, it got me much more intrigued at replaying the game and seeing how differently things could have gone if I had made a few pretty key choices differently. Again, no spoilers, but I will just say there's some choices which are big and significant, and they're pretty well signaled that, like, okay, it's important what you do here. And maybe it's a dialogue choice, or maybe it's an optional quest objective where it says, oh, maybe save this person, or don't. It's up to you. And what you do in that case can have significant impact on how things play out. But there's also other choices, as you would expect in real life, that seem at first to be kind of insignificant and not that big of a deal, but can have significant impact later on. Again, no spoilers, because I think it's really cool when you realize that thing you did that you didn't think much about ended up being pretty important. It's really cool when that happens, but I'm excited to replay the game and see how differently I could make things play out. And lastly, as I touched on earlier, the game is really, really polished. I ran into very, very few bugs in my entire playthrough, as I alluded to earlier. Probably the most noticeable bug that I encountered was that there would be a culling issue, I think is what it was, that would pop up every once in a while, where basically there'd just be some object, like a rock is what it looked like, very small on the screen, just a handful of pixels, but you could see it through walls. Wherever you are, you just are looking around, and when you look back, that thing is for whatever reason visible through all of the walls and mountains and hills and trees or whatever. It just was like the first layer when it should have been covered up by the trees and everything else. I would guess that's probably fixed in the day one patch, because it was a really obvious bug, and in the patch notes it seems like this is one of the things that's addressed, so you may never even see this yourself. I also pondered digging through the footage to try and find this happening, but it would happen for like 5 seconds and then it would like go away, and it's like, again, very small on my screen, so I don't want to dig through the dozens upon dozens upon dozens upon dozens of hours of footage I have to find that little snippet, so we're going to use our imagination. Okay. I'm trying to be practical with what I demand for my editors, and I feel like that would be unreasonable. So just imagine a rock that you can see through walls that would go away fairly quickly. That was one of the bugs. The only other frustration and bug, I guess, that I ran into was in this particular area. I just have a freeze frame of this because, again, I don't want to spoil anything too specific, but basically I was at the top of these stairs and I needed to get down the stairs to go all the way back down, loop around here and go down. But this guard stands guard in front of that stairwell. So what you're supposed to do is basically walk down and throw a rock in the corner or in front of him to alert him so that he walks away. You walk behind him and leave without him ever noticing. Problem is, when I would throw the rock, it wouldn't alert him unless I was standing on a step, like the second or third step down, which is close enough to him that I would alert him to my presence because of how bad Henry smells at this part of the game. There's a reason he smells terrible, and there was a reason. I'll just say that. But because of that, I couldn't actually distract him with the rock without alerting him by being close to him. And it was frustrating because it felt like I should be able to throw the rock from the floor above, just throwing the rock down the stairwell into this corner, and that alerts him. But I think what it is when NPCs are on a different floor than you, they have a different like sound detection sensitivity so that they don't alert to like you walking around a floor above them in the same way that they would if you were walking right in front of them on the same level. But because of that, if I was considered to be on the top floor throwing a rock down, it would effectively mute the sound, because the guard shouldn't get alerted if you throw a rock on the second floor, but should be alerted if you throw a rock on the same floor. That's at least what I think was happening, because the second you would walk down a couple steps to be considered on this floor, you could throw a rock and the guard would be alerted to it. But if you took a couple steps up and throw the rock to the exact same place, it wouldn't alert him. Confusing, I know, it's a weird bug. And it was one that was only a big deal because Henry smelled so terrible at that point. But my solution to this ended up being to basically just load back a save that was like 20 minutes earlier and make sure to go to a trough and wash off before ending up at the top of this stairwell where I needed to get back down, because this is the only way out of that area that's above here. And then I was able to come a couple steps down, throw the rock, alert him, and walk around him. Whereas before, again, if I got close enough to throw the rock, it would alert him because of how bad I smelled. That did happen a couple of times in my experience with KCD 2, where there might be something that you did that ended up with you in a position where you're just kind of screwed and you probably have to load back and try again. It again is one of those instances where they kind of welcome you to put yourself in tough situations that you might not be able to get out of. And so you have to be flexible enough to be willing to go and reload a save if you screw yourself over, because that can happen. And, you know, in that case, I was stuck needing to alert him and distract him, but I smelled too horrible to get close enough to throw the rock properly. But anyway, I hope that this is just a bug and they're able to fix it so when you're on the upper landing, you can just throw the rock and distract him and you don't have to be on the same level when you throw the rock. But that's just a very, very specific thing I ran into. And it wouldn't have really been a problem if I had bathed before this particular quest kicked off. So, there you go. But okay, are you ready for the things I didn't like? Let's talk about this. We're going to rip the Band-Aid off because there are a few things that I would tweak and change if it were up to me. As I mentioned in my preview, there are a few different quest lines where your choices may not be anticipated. The one that I mentioned during the preview that I'll touch on again here is with an old lady you help very early in the game. She has a dead body outside of her house, a guy that tried to come and attack you basically, and he ended up getting killed in the process. And she has a couple lines of dialogue about how much she hates seeing the body there and how gross and smelly and disgusting it is and how she just wants it gone. And so I tried to anticipate that for her and take the body out into the forest and dump it like 100 yards from her house. However, when I went back and spoke to her, she then gave me a quest objective to move the body and bury it or just dump it in the forest, which I had already done. I had anticipated that action on her part and that desire, and so I did it. But because it didn't anticipate me helping her out before that, I had to just redo it. I had to go collect the body and then move it somewhere else, and then it triggered as me having done it. And it's not that big of a deal. It's just one of those things where I think because the rest of the game is so good at anticipating all the possible choices you can make, whether you bail on the quest line at this point or you don't help this person when they ask you to, they anticipate so many things that the player could do that when they don't, it stands out like a sore thumb. Just like if you have a bowl of rice and you shove a starburst in it, that one thing stands out a lot because the rest of it is all very uniform and exactly what you would expect it to be. But the one thing you didn't expect to be there stands out very shockingly. I don't know why I went to rice and starburst. That was a weird example. Weird analogy. I don't know. Moving on. I don't know. Probably says something about my inner psyche that I put rice and starburst in the same category. Might just be hungry. Anyway, what else? Stealth stuff. There are many stealth sequences tied to the main story quest line, and to be clear, they make sense narratively and are very important in terms of pacing, so you're not just hacking and slashing through the entire game or just talking to people the whole game. And they're pretty well put together. The enemy AI is reasonable and behaves as you would expect. But there were a number of times where I felt the path that was designed for the player was extremely narrow. There's one particular instance where you are in a pretty dense forest and you have to stealth around many dozens of guards that are kind of pacing in that forested area. And the path for you to go is fairly easy to go once you kind of figure out what the game wants you to do and you kind of see how winding through the rocks this way and over that hill there that way and through these trees in this way. Once you figure that out, it's something you can do very quickly and effortlessly. But when you're trying to figure out what that path is, you're going to get caught like 15 times. And it can be pretty frustrating. Even if you're drinking potions that buff your stealth, even if you're drinking a potion that gives you incredible night vision, it still can be frustrating how often there's a very narrow path for you to go. And if you stray from that path that the gameplay designers set up for you, it's 1,000 times more difficult. And so I feel like the stealth sequences are areas where the game's freedom and agency is sort of lost and you're much more on railroad tracks going through this very particular layout. This next one is maybe not an actual problem, but I'm going to mention it anyways since I was kind of perturbed by it. As I said, the side quests are some of the best things in KCD2, but as you go, especially into the later game and you do a lot of side content and you're engaging with a lot of different enemies and dynamic encounters and people are jumping you on the streets trying to mug you and they happen to have really good armor, you'll find yourself collecting a very impressive kit of items and gear. And it's very, very likely that you will play through the final mission with significantly better armor and equipment than it seems the gameplay designers expected you to have. And again, no spoilers here, but basically there's a point where Henry will get equipment that's supposed to be like, wow, you're kitted out now, let's go fight. That kind of thing, that happens in a lot of games towards the end. Except the stuff that I was given was significantly worse than what I already had by like a good amount. If what I had, like my helmet was worth 5,000 something groschen, what they gave me was worth like 2,400. And it looked nice for the cutscenes or whatever, but it just was way worse than what I already had. And so it made the final quest line, I feel, significantly easier than they probably anticipated it being, with me just able to chop through enemies, eat a bunch of hits and not really worry about it. It's also, part of the benefit of doing a lot of side quests and side content is that it'll make the later game easier in theory for the main quest line. But it was something that was, it felt off. It felt like they didn't anticipate me having as nice of stuff as I did. And so the final fights were not as challenging as I expected them to be. I mean, maybe I'm just too good and I'm just really amazing at the combat, but more likely I had just grinded out really good gear. And so I had an unfair advantage or perhaps fair advantage in those final fights. But it was something I found myself multiple times realizing is I am way better equipped than anybody else. There's a big boss fight towards the end that's sort of optional. That'll make sense when you play it. But basically, like, there's a big boss fight and it's supposed to be this big moment of putting it all out on the table. And I waltzed through it. Like, I didn't take a single hit and it was just very, very easy. even though it felt like it was supposed to be really, really hard. And you know, one of those gameplay things where there's a boss fight and you could have an easy time with it, but then the cutscene triggers at the end of the boss fight and it shows them like really struggling against each other, but you just waltzed through it, or you one-shotted the boss, and then, you know, the cutscene makes it look really, really tough. That's what this was. That's kind of how this felt. Again, I'm sorry I can't just show you clips of this, but it's one of those things where if you see some of these shots, significant spoilers happen, and I don't want to do that. So we're going to use our imagination for this stuff, because I swear to God, I don't want to like accidentally spoil one of the coolest things in the game. So I'm just not. Okay, we'll be quiet. In a month or two after you've played it, you can come over to Luke Stevens Live, my streams, and ask me about it, and we can be more specific, and I'll show the clips and we can delve into it. But so much of this game is amazing the first time you experience it, so I'll be damned if I'm the one that spoils it for you. Okay, so we're going to use our imaginations. In this same vein, I think the economy can also be broken fairly easily, especially in Kuttenberg. It reminds me of Fallout New Vegas with the armor grinding you could do at the Gunrunner's base. Funnily enough, I actually booted Fallout New Vegas and went there to actually show this, because I did it so much back in the day when I was like a kid. I remember playing Fallout New Vegas, I guess teenager, but whatever. And I would just go and grind these Gunrunner guards, because after you kill these guards, they drop armor sets that are very valuable. They're worth like 3,000 caps or something. And you can just take the armor immediately, go sell it, wait for these guys to respawn, and then you just grind that out. And you have basically unlimited cash in the game. It's kind of ridiculous. And it's a similar thing in KCD2, where once you start to realize how to grind out the collection of different armor and helmets and swords and things from different guards, the game becomes really broken. You can afford any potion you want. You can afford any food you want. You can afford any weapon stuff you want. Yeah, combat armor, look at that, 3,019 caps. Exactly. Like, why would you do anything else other than grind this? And as I've said a bajillion times, if a player is given the opportunity to exploit something in a game, they will, because players are resourceful and they're trying to play the game. And that might include exploiting an imbalance. And I feel like in KCD2, there's also many instances, especially like the last 25% or so of the main story. If you're doing side stuff, you're just going to be drowning in money. Like I think I finished the main story quest line with something insane like 15,000 groschen just in my inventory, because I had just like min-maxed all of my playstyle stuff to the point where I was just swimming in cash, and I really didn't even have anything to spend it on, since all my armor was fantastic. So I hope maybe in the day one patch they rebalance some of that, so players don't run into the position I was in, where everything was just kind of broken, and it was my own damn fault because I engaged with the game a lot. But I would imagine that's something they could balance, and I figured I'd bring it up here because I do think it made some of those final encounters easier than they should have otherwise been. But if anything, it gets me really excited for the hardcore mode that is expected to be coming for the game at some point this year in a, I believe, free update for the game. So I guess I have that to look forward to. And it's a good problem to have. Like, my frustration is that I played the game too hard and got too into it to the point where I feel like they could maybe smooth out some of my breaking of it, but the ability to break it is also part of the game. It's a video game after all, so maybe it's all by design. But that brings us to the end of the video and the wrap up. To put it as simply as I possibly can, I consider Kingdom Come Deliverance II to be one of the most impressive sequels, RPGs, narrative games, historical fiction games. Like, it's one of the most remarkable gaming experiences I've had in a while. And especially coming off of last year when I felt like there were a handful of pretty good games, but it wasn't a really exciting year. This is the perfect way to start 2025. And it really should cause a lot of other RPG developers to sit up and pay attention, because they make this look easy and it's not. I mean, the game is so freaking good at what it's trying to do that I just find it thoroughly amazing and immersive. And I can't wait to play it through again. Maybe I'm the only person on the planet who feels this way and loves this game as much as I do. I would guess, based on how good it is, in my opinion, that other reviewers will probably be in a similar spot. But time will tell. You know, when the review embargo lifts and this video goes public, I'm sure I'm going to be watching the other reviews and seeing what other people are saying about it. But as of right now, I'm just thoroughly impressed. I cannot praise this enough. And as I said earlier, I consider this to be a masterpiece, and it's already climbed the ranks as one of my favorite games I've ever played. And I can't wait to play it again. But with all that said, thank you for watching. I love you all dearly. Thank you for making my dreams a reality. I mean, I get to talk about video games for a living. Do you realize how insane that is? Like, I got to play this game early because of you guys supporting and watching these videos. That's insane. So truly, truly, thank you for making my dreams a reality. Never, ever think I take it for granted. I'm humbled by it every single day. And I love and appreciate you guys so much for everything you do. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. And if you didn't, I'm sorry. I don't know what to do about that. But anyway, I'm bad at outros. Thank you for watching, guys. I love you all dearly. Make sure to go play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It's that good. It's fantastic. But until next time, my friends, I love you all. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.